So these folks are just playing in our face right now. All bets are off. They just throwing everything at us now. So we start the episode off with little Nikki still stuck in that dungeon, scared for his life. And then the masked man, who we all know to be Captain Spencer, tosses the food and a bottle of water in there, which he put a lot of pills in to make him drowsy and fall asleep. And while Nikki is out, the man comes in to take his jersey off. But the drugs weren't that potent because he was alert enough to say, "Dad?" He recognized either his voice or maybe a smell, aftershave, cologne. It could have been a combination of the two. But the fact that he recognized him even with the mask on, that presents a different problem for Captain Spencer. And then, of course, he stands up after he hears him say "Dad," and he pulls off the mask as if we didn't already know who it was because the writers were leading us in that direction. I say this is a problem for Captain Spencer because it seems like he's trying to keep Nikki alive for some reason. Now, some people have tried to say that this isn't his son. So it wouldn't make sense for him to be like really trying to fight to keep this boy alive if he really didn't love this kid like his own child. Because he had no problem taking out Jimmy Powell. He's different with Nikki though. He cut his finger off with hesitation, and he was very gentle when he was removing the jersey. So either there's some deep remorse, or that's his actual son. But we'll discuss that later in this video. So then we get over to the Morgan residence, and Harry and Dexter are having a conversation. So Deb didn't come home last night, and all of a sudden Harry is acting like he cares about Deb. He's like, "Hey, have you seen your sister, Dexter?" And Dexter's like, "Well, she's not over Sophia's house?" And he was like, "Nah, she said she was going to Geo's. Do you know where he lives?" And Dexter was like, "Well, I heard he had a spot over on the beach." And Harry wasn't quite putting two and two together. He was like, "Oh, the kid got his own place?" Like, "No, Harry, a kid does not have his own place. Clearly, this is a grown man." And then he asked Dex, "How old is he?" He was like, "About 25. And then for like a split second, he acted like he cared and was upset, talking about he thought he was in high school. That's crazy. And so he got over the fact that Deb was dating a 25-year-old pretty fast and started asking Dexter, "What do you think about him? How is he?" And Dexter was like, "Oh, he's pretty cool. We had a good time. We hot-wired a car. It was just a harmless prank." And Harry tried to get upset about that, talking about, "You hot-wired a car?" And Dexter was like,
"You taught me how to do it."
And this goes back to the question that I asked in a couple of my videos. I was trying to figure out what was the training that Dexter went through, because it sounds like Harry just taught this man how to be a criminal. So the thing is, you started the code because you wanted to be able to quench his like needs when the urges were too heavy, but he went after people that deserved it. My thing is, you taught him how to break in people's houses, you taught him how to hotwire a car, and on top of that, this man felt that it was okay for him to go steal from the horse track when he needed those tranquilizers. So I'm trying to figure out what the actual training was. And this is why I think he's a bad father. Like, the leadership is terrible. The thought process just don't make sense. And then if you add to the fact that Deb has been begging this man to give her attention, and then he just keeps on ignoring her. He's lucky that she hasn't found her way to more dangerous territory. Another thing I don't like about Harry is the fact that he doesn't listen when Dexter's talking to him. Like, Dexter actually told him what he felt about Captain Spencer, and Harry was like, "Oh, you do sound crazy because that doesn't make sense at all. Like, I know Captain Spencer. I went to his son's christening and everything. There's zero chance that he did anything like this. You wouldn't understand because you're not a father. This is just about you, Dexter." And even though I would sometimes agree that Dexter's being selfish and trying to just go for the kill, he did say he wanted to kill whoever did this to these kids. But he usually shows up with factual information. And honestly, Dexter might be the best detective that Miami Metro has, because all these killers and criminals are in your midst, and you can't even figure that out while they're there. So Harry dismissed all of that by saying, "Hey, stop worrying about Captain Spencer and go find your sister." So when we finally see Gio and Deb on screen, they're in the bed together. They got that afterglow that looks like they had just made love, and they are living in the lap of luxury. And since she's suspended because she makes bad choices like Harry, she was like sitting there talking to Gio, and Gio was like, "Hey, you want to come on this trip with me?" And of course she's going to say yes because she's young and she's free, and he seems to be the best thing that ever happened to her. What could possibly go wrong in this situation? So when Gio was carrying Deb out of the kitchen, the camera stopped at this snake head. It's like a statue or whatever on the counter. And I'm wondering, is it just decor that they wanted to stop at for the shot? Or is it something of a symbol like for a group that he's in? Or is it something that's an Easter egg from the previous original series? Maybe somebody can answer that in the comments. So Dex had to swing by the school and run into Sophia. He was like, "Hey, have you seen Deb?" And while she was standing there trying to make him jealous of this random dude, she was like, "No. We broke up as friends, so like I don't know nothing about that." And then he sheds light on why he's over there and how Deb was missing and all that kind of stuff. And she was nice enough to actually help him by giving him Gio's last name. So Harry shows up to pick up LaGuerta, and she walks down with this man and she's making out with him. Found out his name was Miguel Prado. She says, oh, he thinks he's going to be district attorney one day. Which, if you watch the original series, he absolutely did. My only thing about him is he's my least favorite killer from the original series. He just had to go. I hated him. And I like that they keep showing how these characters are intertwined in old stories before they get to the people that we knew in the original series. I find that to be pretty cool. I just don't care for Miguel. Now, the Trinity Killer or the Ice Truck Killer, I was all for them. So let's talk about Laura and Harry. I saw this flashback come up and I'm like, oh, we inching closer and closer to this freaking like storage container because they decided to meet at the park, right? In broad daylight, got Brian and Dexter out there just playing like it's nothing. And they're sitting back to back just having a conversation. And eventually they turn and start talking to each other. Now, what bothers me the most about this scene is the fact that you decided to put your kids in harm's way by taking them to the park and talking to a cop, and all while working for one of the most dangerous men in the world. Now, that's on Laura's end, but I feel like Harry is the main issue here because he probably told her, hey, meet over here at the park. But also, we got to talk about the fact that you got so unprofessional that your personal relationship kind of blurred the lines. Now you got Dexter over here calling you daddy. That ain't your daddy, boy. Leave that man alone. Literally, he doesn't know any better because he's a kid. And all he knows is that man be making eyes at my mama, and I feel like they go together, so he is my dad. So it's nothing for him to run over there and tell Harry, hey, let's go swing. And who didn't expect Estrada's people to be watching? Apparently Laura and Harry, because clearly she hasn't seen anybody in that organization be handled or dealt with violently. So when we're back at Miami Metro, Captain Spencer is in there and he is laying it on thick. I remember somebody in my comment section on the last video for episode 7 was like, yeah, the captain was kind of doing too much. But you ain't seen nothing till you saw this episode because that man was laying it on so thick. It was crazy. He was like, I want to know what they're doing before they do it. He was like, find these people. I need more information because these people could have my son and we're running out of time. And then he said, somebody knows something. And then right as he said that, Brother Dexter walks up in there and of course he knows something. But lucky for him, Dexter had more pressing business because Harry was like, find your sister. So he's going in there to look up information and he's tapping and tapping on that computer. And then he finds Gio's real name and finds his rap sheet. The brother got a little record on him. And if you ever needed proof to say that he wasn't an accountant, this is it, because nobody's going to let you handle the money if you are a criminal. And I assumed he wasn't an accountant because he was always available. I've never seen an accountant so free. So in the nick of time, Dexter finds Gio's address. And right after that, Camilla shows up with a box full of files for Dexter. And she's like having a really nice little chit chat session with him. And she was like, hey, I got a boat. If you ever want to use it, just let me know. And then Tanya comes in and adds a few more files to that box and was like, this is your reward for being so good at your job. This is from Captain Spencer. And that is where he messed up. See, the guilty always act guilty. Had he just acted normal, Dexter wouldn't even paid attention to him. So Dexter's wheels start turning and he's like, why do you have me looking at cold cases instead of looking at this current case that is very pressing right now? And then add to the fact that the captain was like, hey, I gotta go home and take a shower. I'll be back. Dexter's suspicion has increased now. So now I gotta follow you. See, this is what you wanted. And Dexter was doing a really good job of telling this man without being caught. These folks just be leaving work at Miami Metro and don't nobody say nothing to him. Like Dexter be skipping work all the time. Nobody just says, hey, you were missing for a long time. Where were you? And this is why y'all got so many killers and crooks over at Miami Metro. So while Dexter's out here doing his due diligence with the captain, Deb is out here on the boat with Gio just living her best life. You know, I'm honestly just placing this here so y'all can see further proof that he is not an accountant. I mean, I've heard of CFOs and all these different people that make bread, but like literally, this man does not work. Now back to Dex, because Dexter's over here watching the captain and the captain is over here talking to somebody who looks like he tweaking, and he hands him a bag. It's this yellow, looks like Dollar General bag. He also hands him a wad of cash. And then he finds a dilemma because 2 cars pull off and Dexter has to follow one because they're going in opposite directions. So Dexter ends up following the guy he doesn't know, the guy that was tweaking. And he follows him to this house with the gnome in front of it. And you see him knock at this door. He walks into the house and he essentially planted evidence for the captain. And before he could get any other information, he got paged by Harry and he ended up having to go to a payphone. And Harry was like, "Did you find your sister yet?" And Dexter was like, "That's what you paged me for, bruh?" He was like, "Fam, I did not find her. Also, I talked to Sophia and she said she don't want to be found." And Harry was like, "You just gonna stop looking for your sister because Sophia told you that?" And then of course, Dexter had to share what he was doing. He was like, "Hey, your boy, Spencer, has been acting a fool today. He was acting weird. I had to follow him." And of course, Harry got pissed again. He was like, "Dexter, you need to leave us alone, man. You're not a detective." And honestly, that's rich coming from Harry because you literally taught him how to be a detective and a criminal. And on top of that, you are asking him to play detective by finding Deb. And these are the kinds of conversations that make me want to slap Harry up so bad. And this is the second conversation they had that day regarding Deb and Geo, as well as Captain Spencer. And the results of that conversation were the same as this morning's. He said, "Forget about Captain Spencer and go find your sister." And so after Harry hung up and he and LaGuerta started talking to those officers in Tampa about Paul Petrie, a lot of things were confirmed for me. Because he turned out not to be the killer, he was actually one of the killed. And the moment they said he was a psychiatrist that specialized in childhood behavior, I said, it's a wrap. We already know who did this. And a lot of people have been saying that Brian Moser has been trying to show himself to Dexter. He's been trying to connect. So I assumed this was his doctor, and Brian just snapped on him one day and killed him, stole his car, and then drove to Miami, sold it for cheap, just to get rid of it. And he tried to cover his tracks because he ripped some of the pages out of the calendar to make sure people couldn't get on his trail. But, we can always find you in other ways. So the officers told LaGuerta and Harry that they could come to the station and look through the patient files. It's like 300 of them. And so we're sitting at Laura Moser's house and she's getting her nails painted. Brian is doing the best he can. I was going to be like, you missed the spot if it was her. But then I was like, oh, a kid is doing this. Okay, he's doing a great job. Keep it up, little brother. Side note, did you notice the signature Ice Truck Killer paint job? And when you look at that smile on his face, you can see all the innocence on him. Him and Dexter. Even though I still remember him pulling the tails off all of those lizards. He still got a good little heart in there. And just as he's getting ready to paint yet another nail, the estrangers bust up in the house and they snatch all of them up. If I'm being honest, Laura and Brian actually put up a good fight. And then they did what they could until the guy pulled out on them and he was like, cut all of it out. So Gio and Deb get to the island and they meet some of his little cute friends or whatever. And so they go on to party. They doing all the drugs and the drink. And Deb is out there like, "Hey, baby, I am parched. I'm going to go get some water over here. I'll be right back." And while at the bar, she recognizes that some people are walking over to Gio's boat with a big box. And then Gio shows up to distract her. And so Gio comes over there to distract her from what she's seeing. And he was like, "Don't worry about it." And then he got a little bit aggressive about it. Like I said, don't worry about it. And then he pulled out some bling and it distracted her real quick. I mean, if we being honest, she is 17 and her self-esteem is in hell. So she will accept any old man that breathes and smiles at her. And I do feel bad for her character. And I know why Gio got her. She's pretty green. And he can't date a woman his age or older because they gonna see through the BS. The moment they ask, "Hey, where's your office? I want to come drop something off," he can't do it. Meanwhile, Dexter is one step closer to finding Deb and Gio. So Dexter goes over to Gio's condo and a woman answers the door. This woman named Ariana just happens to be Gio's fiance. And of course she doesn't know anything about Deb until Dexter tells her. I think Dex met his match with this woman because both of them are so unbothered by things that you would be shocked by. Literally, she was like, "Oh, he got a girlfriend? Of course he brought a hoe to this house." But then Dexter, when you looked at how he was acting with Sophia earlier, she was trying to make him jealous. That did not work. And then finding out that Gio had a fiance, he was like, "Oh, congratulations." He was just so nonchalant with it. And so Dex comes in behind her and says, "Hey, do you know where they went?" And she says, "Well, he told me he was going to our condo at Bimini Royale for some business trip." And she said, "I guess since your sister is coming, it's a sex trip as well." And Dexter was like, "Can I use your phone?" And so he called up his girl Camilla and was like, "Hey sis, is that offer about that boat still good?" So Dexter hit the sea on the way to search for his sister. Meanwhile, Harry and LaGuerta are up in Tampa looking through the medical files of Dr. Petrie. And as expected, Brian Moser's name popped up in the records. And since Harry found this record, he was like, "Ooh, I got to get LaGuerta out of here so I can sit with this thing real quick." And he said, "You know what? I could take some of that raggedy coffee they were talking about earlier." And he's lucky because she was being nice enough to go out there and get it for him, because some other women would have been like, hey, go get your own coffee, bruh. And once he opened that file, yeah, he did need to sit down because there was a lot of information in that file to process. So he had been discharged because he was no longer a threat to himself or others. So in the file, it showed that he had a violent history. He was borderline personality disorder. I mean, he had all kinds of stuff going on. And then it got a little bit juicier because it started talking about them Morgans and started tugging on their wigs. He said Brian wanted to stay with Dexter, but the Morgans would only take one of them. So he was upset about that. He said he knew about the affair with his mom, Laura, and he said that Dexter was calling him daddy. So Harry had to snatch that page up out of there with alacrity. And just when you thought it couldn't get worse,
it went from worse to worse, sir.
There was a page in that file that talked about Brian from the nurse's perspective. His nurse had multiple complaints about him being aggressive and violent toward him, and his name was Raul Martinez. And that didn't ring a bell for me at first, but then they did a flashback shot, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the first case that Dexter ever worked on. So Harry's mind was just blown. With all the stuff he just saw, he closed that file up so fast and just put it in his bag. And then LaGuardia walks right back in, and she said, hey, what did I miss? And he said a whole lot of nothing. But I think she was suspicious of him. She already doesn't know him, so the trust has to be earned. And she was like, something don't feel right about what you just said. But my question is, what is Harry going to do with this information? Is he going to try to hide and cover up the stuff that the man's been doing? Or is he going to try to actually catch him and like change his behavior? But you got to understand that the damage has been done already. Brian is already out in the world. He already had his first taste of blood a while ago. And now he's just out on the hunt. So I wonder if Harry's going to try to protect him and rectify what he did, because a lot of that was his fault. They didn't pick safer places to hide and talk in private. He also got personally involved with his mom. And then on top of that, Brian and Dexter saw their mom get chopped up in a storage container. And you're going to tell me that he goes through that traumatic event, and then y'all do another traumatic event by taking his brother, the only other person that he knows, out of his life. That man is already going to be a nutcase. You could have helped them both, but you decided to only take one. What would be a crazier twist would be if Brian actually killed Harry instead of Harry committing self-elimination. So we hit another flashback, and Harry and Bobby are going to look for Laura because she's not answering her phone. Harry says she always does it. So once they get to the porch, they recognize that the door is ajar, so you know they about to get the strap. They recognize that somebody done kicked that thing in, and a skirmish has taken place because it's stuff all over the house. You know, stuff knocked over, the polish isn't closed up, it's still kind of wet. And, Harry was like, you know what? They've been taken. Next, you go to a scene where they're on the port where all those storage containers are, and the Mosers are in that container with some other people that's bloody and kind of beaten up themselves. And they look so scared, all huddled up. But the end is nigh. The beginning is nigh for Dexter and Brian, though. And then we bounce back over here to see what Deb and Gio are doing. And Deb is still in her young and dumb era. And she's so enamored by her distraction bracelet, she done turned into Chaperone, talking about, dumb love, I love being stupid. And Gio gets up because he needs to take a phone call. And so she was like, I need to go grab my jacket. Now, part of me feels like she was just trying to get over there to the boat so she could be nosy. Because, girl, why you need a jacket on the beach right now? Is it that cold in Miami? So she hopped her little happy self on that boat and then started looking around and being nosy and finding things that she wasn't supposed to find. And Gio did not like that. He was like, I told you to mind your business. And Gio, you got to understand, you are dating a teenager and they don't listen to anybody, especially adults. He said, I thought you was one of those cool girls that just could play her part and chill out. And you are clearly not that cool. Homeboy switched it up on her so fast because he was like, get off my boat. And she clearly wasn't moving fast enough because he was about to toss her off that boat. Then she wound up sitting on the beach at night yelling at Gio even though he wasn't anywhere to be found. She was stranded over there, or so she thought. Until Dexter popped up and was like, Deb, is that you, girl? And she was like, I'm so happy to see you because Gio ain't shit and I need a ride home. But then she was like, well, Dexter, how did you know I was out here? And Dexter was like, sis, Gio's fiance dropped all the knowledge. And then Deb was like, of course he got a fiance. It was a beautiful embrace in that moment between Deb and Dexter. And then they were on their merry way. And let the record reflect that this is the second time that Dexter saved Deb from something that could have been a catastrophe this season. And I was just waiting on the shoe to drop with Gio because he just seemed too good to be true. I was like, he couldn't possibly be this good. And Deb has terrible fortune with men. I wonder if this will be the end for Gio this season, or if he'll return because he is doing something illegal most likely. And then Deb threw her expensive bracelet, or at least the bracelet that we think is expensive, off the boat into the ocean, and as it sank, they sat there and watched it go down. And Deb was like, oh my gosh, I threw this in the ocean. I could have pawned this. Do you think we can get it back? And Dexter was like, what you throw in the ocean stays in the ocean. Now, this is where Dexter had an epiphany. I would have thought that epiphany would have happened on the way to pick Deb up. So now he knows what to do for the body disposal. And while they're just sitting in the ocean, they have a nice heart-to-heart conversation. She's talking about why Harry doesn't really pay attention to her. She says she has nothing and no one. And Dexter comes back and says, hey, you have me and Harry. And, Dexter's trying to cover for his dad. He was like, that's why I'm out here. And she was like, but he could have come to get me. And that's what I was thinking. I'm like, aren't you the dad? Aren't you supposed to come look for your kids? And see, this is how that first boy drowned, because you don't pay any attention to your kids. Dexter is not a parent, and he's not a detective either, according to Harry. Harry should have been on this rescue mission. So then they got home and they thought it was going to be a blockbuster night. Get some pizza, get some edibles, and then all of a sudden that beeper goes off. Dexter is being called into work. So once again, Deb is being left alone to deal with her thoughts and to be so emotional and depressed. So she walks over to her mom's chair at the table in the dining room and she sits down and she just starts boo-hooing. Now, this is a very serious scene, and let me tell you, this sister right here be acting. I love her as Deb. So I think this is the moment where Deb actually makes up her mind about what she wants to do with her life. She already says she doesn't have a scholarship. She got suspended from school. She doesn't have a friend. She doesn't have a lot. And I think this is the moment where she's going to choose to be in law enforcement because she'll be able to spend more time with Harry and Dexter. Another thing that I liked about this scene is it was an interesting transition. So they made the room very big. It expanded, and then it kind of makes it seem like she's super lonely. But it's also transitioning into the next scene, which is more of a police scene, and you see lights and stuff shining through in her scene. So it almost kind of seems like it's foreshadowing what's to come for Deb, which is working at Miami Metro. So Dexter shows up to Miami Metro, and they have SWAT and everybody out there because they got an anonymous tip saying that Lil Nikki was at some cartel stash house. And after hearing about the cartel potentially having Lil Nikki, Dexter was starting to doubt his theory that he had about Captain Spencer. And that held on for 5 seconds until they got to the stash house because Dexter saw that gnome. But when he saw that gnome, he was like, keep the party going. So while they were in the house, Captain Spencer was just kind of going around being obnoxious, looking through the house saying, where's my son? As if he doesn't know where he is. And so this goes back to what I said in my last video. What is Captain Spencer doing? Is he trying to set up a cartel and get them locked up or killed or something? Does he know these people? Because it feels like he might know them. One of the guys was staring at him really tough. It's like, what are you doing? Or what if he knows these people and he's like, they know my secret, so I need to get rid of them so they can't talk against me in court. And he went completely crazy once they found the jersey that he gave that tweaker guy to drop off at that house. And he was like, where's my son? And pointing the gun at everybody, starting the gunfight. And pretty much most of the people got shot. You got my man Bobby all the way messed up because you got him hit in the neck. I truly hope he survives. When Dexter saw Bobby was being carried out on that shield, he felt some kind of way because he was like, I literally could have done something had I not been distracted today. But trust and believe, he won't be distracted the next time. And he found that yellow bag that the jersey was held in. So I'm wondering if he can get a partial fingerprint off of that. And I bet the name on the bag is actually the name of the store that they buy those sunshine meals or whatever that they give to the kids in the dungeon. So we all know that Dexter is going to talk to Harry next episode and say, hey, I got way more evidence now. I got the evidence to get that man booked for real. And Bobby might be the catalyst for Dexter to get that green light from Harry because that's his homeboy. And the fact that you put him in harm's way over a lie, oh, if Dexter shows him the right evidence, it's on. And what's even wilder is the fact that Captain Spencer is doing all of this while knowing where the son is, got a whole bunch of bodies just out here. And he kept overreacting, then threw the TV down, banging the stool on the counter and all this stuff, had to relinquish his firearm. So to end the episode, they showed Laura Moser, Dexter, and Brian in the container. And Estrada comes in there and said, hey, I'm so disappointed in you, Laura. And she was like, spare my kids. They didn't do anything wrong. And he was like, well, the sins of the mother. And so he went all the way to the front of the bin and started chopping up them other people first with the chainsaw. And he's gonna make his way back to Laura and the kids, obviously. But she was like, close your eyes, kids. And Dexter did not close his eyes at all. I'm talking about they got bigger. So that moment that some people were looking for, it finally happened. You didn't see it happen to them all the way, but I think we're gonna see like the aftermath of it next episode. So that was pretty much the show. I enjoyed a lot of it. What I will say is the writing was a little bit too on the nose. It was very easy to predict. I really appreciate it when writers make the viewers kind of like work for the twist, like they're not really sure where it's coming from. It just gives you more to look forward to. I'm excited to see what happens next week, especially the situation that's going on with Captain Spencer and little Nikki, because Nikki actually said dad, even if he was half asleep, he heard him and he kind of recognized him. So he might not remember him, but in the case that he does, it might be a problem for Captain Spencer, because you can't just go home and be like, oh, I got my son back. No, that boy knows that you tried to kill him. And I also want to see what happens with this Harry and Brian situation. I want to see how Harry responds to something that he was responsible for building. You built this creature partially because of your behavior. So that'll be pretty interesting to watch next week. So if you made it this far in the show, thank you for watching. Please leave a comment down below. Let me know what your thoughts are on the show, as well as how I did. And then also hit that like button, subscribe if you want to, share if you can, and hit that notification bell for future content. And until next time, take care.